So in my last rum video we explored the idea of using sugar in dunder to recycle and make a cheaper rum. Behind me I've just made a 60 litre wash of rum for about $40 worth of ingredients. But I don't know if it's going to be any good. So let me explain a little bit better. What is behind me is a mixture of water, some yeast shrub for nutrients, and about 15 litres of animal feed molasses that I picked up from a local animal feed store. And it's bad. I don't know how else to explain it. I mixed it up the same way I would with a normal refinery sugar molasses like this from the Bundaberg factory, and it's a little bit thinner than that, but it could just be because I left it out in the sun. If I open this up, it doesn't smell like molasses. It doesn't smell pleasant. The yeast hasn't taken off yet either, so it's not yet at that point where it's bubbling away, and sometimes that's where the good aromas can come out. But if I just give it a little whiff, it just doesn't smell right. And that got me thinking that it's time for a little bit of an experiment, because I've read some articles about animal feed molasses being used for rum, and apparently it's quite common with commercial rums, and it's quite common in the hobby, and it turns out to be pretty good in the end. But it smells awful right now. If I make a wash out of regular food grade molasses, it smells amazing through and through, from beginning to end. You can smell those notes that you expect to get at the end. So first of all, I'm curious to see how this bad boy is going to turn out in the end. Secondly, I want to see how it stacks up against the more traditional rums I've been making with food grade molasses. The reason why I've switched to this, I'm basically getting double the materials to what I would get now if I bought food grade. So it's a saving worth the cost of the product. That's what we're going to find out in this video. We're going to let this one ferment out. We're going to do a stripping run 3 times because it's 60 litres and I only have a 25 litre still. And then we're going to repeat the whole process again for the second one. So I woke up last night to do my late night pee, and bathroom's obviously just right above me here, and I could hear something going nuts, and it was this guy. So fermentation's kicked off absolutely fine, not a problem there. The smell, the medicinal smell, is still there, but it's really, it's like sort of undercut with the smell of stewed apple, which isn't totally unpleasant. It doesn't smell as off-putting as it initially did. So that's great. What I'm going to do for this video is we're going to cut through time a little bit. I'm going to show you how I made this batch by making the food grade batch. This time I'm glad I remembered to close the lid on the tap, because I left it open during the animal feed debacle and got molasses everywhere. This is a little bit more thick consistency, so I think the sugar content in this molasses is probably a lot higher than the animal feed molasses, so we may see a much bigger return or yield on this than we did on, or do on that one. And I guess you'll have to just either keep watching or skip right to the end to find out whether or not that is the truth. But for now, let's talk about the recipe that I followed in making this 60 litre wash for rum. So as you can tell, I've already used 14 kgs of molasses in this wash, and I also have gone and gotten 4 litres of dunder from previous washes and boiled that up to kill any infections. And while that's boiling up, I'm also adding the trub of a previous wash as well. That is the yeast cake that forms at the bottom of the fermentation bucket. So this hasn't gone through the still, this is just live yeast. And we're effectively killing it to denature it, and it will become a nutrient for the yeast that we do use in this wash. And because there wasn't much trub that I was able to use for this, I'm also adding a little bit of bread maker's yeast. Just regular yeast that you can get from the supermarket. If you don't have any yeast trub, you could just use 200 grams of this rather than what I'm doing here, which is using about a quarter of a container. I should probably mention as well that the other variations that I did to this recipe are that I added a big heaping teaspoon or 2 of Epsom salts and the juice of 1 or 2 lemons. I don't have a lemon. This is the only yellow fruit that I could find in my kitchen. There are some on the tree, I'll get them later. Oh, and also proof that I'm boiling the trub and all that disgusting stuff that I talked about before, so that you don't think I'm a monster. And also I skimmed off the mold cap, okay? It's not all gross, and all of that stuff goes towards that yum Jamaican Caribbean rum flavor. Oh, also, every day for the week that it's fermenting, I'm going to chuck the skins of any bananas I eat into there as well, just to add to the funkiness of it. I've done that with the last 2 rums that I've made, and it just made it so much better. Once it's boiled, I add it to the molasses and mix it up so that everything combines well. The molasses melts down and you get a homogeneous mixture, and then we can top it up to 60 litres with cold water. Once you've got the cold water added and it's at a pretty stable temperature, this is where I generally add the lemon juice. So just squeeze the juice of, I think I did about 3 lemons into this mix. And then I just combined everything really well and made sure that not only the molasses had been completely mixed in, but I'm also oxygenating the mixture here. Once the mixture is at a temperature of below 36 degrees Celsius, you can then go ahead and add your yeast. I'm using the Yellow Label Angel yeast for this particular experiment. I'm using this for every single batch of rum that I'm making. So that way we can just have a stable yeast base that we're using, so the flavor profile can be attributed more to the ingredients rather than what the yeast esters are that have been thrown out. And I'm putting in exactly 100 grams of yeast. That is exactly 100 grams. I don't care what the scale said, but it was 100 grams of yeast. Pretty big day, but we've finished finally making another wash of 60 litres of rum with the food grade molasses. We've also distilled the last 2 runs of the animal feed molasses, which we'll now go back and I'll show you that. Now we're back in time doing the very first stripping run from the 60 litre wash of food grade molasses that we made before I even started filming this thing. So we're just filling her up right now with what actually smells like a pretty decent rum wash. It doesn't have any of that off flavour that it had at the beginning of this process. It just smells like regular molasses wash. Making me wonder if this whole thing was a waste of time. But hey, I'm going to get a lot of rum out of it, so I'm going to keep doing it. Now my goal with each stripping run will be to I have to do them in 3, so for each run I'm going to do a minimal amount of cleaning on the still itself. I'm going to empty out all of the leftover dunder that's in there and save that for something else. But for the most part I'm going to let them accumulate a little bit of scorching at the bottom, and that should add some, authentic, rustic caramel notes to the finished distillate. So that's my goal. I know it sounds like I'm just being lazy, but I'm not. That's totally planned. Let's start running it. It's Saturday night now, 8 days after fermentation started on this thing. So it's been sitting quiet for about 2 days. And this morning I put a big scoop of sour cream in here for the lactobacillus, I think that's what it's called, the souring agent. So this first batch probably won't be as effective, but the rest that's sitting in there, the other 40 litres, that will have a decent amount of lactobacillus, I'm sure I'm saying that right, percolating in there, giving it some souring notes. So it's just kind of speeding up the process of if I just let it sit there for 2 or 3 weeks. I haven't plugged it in. Anticlimax. We're just starting to get drips, but the temperature is at almost 93 degrees Celsius, which is very bizarre, and it makes me think that maybe something went wrong with the fermentation. Generally what would happen is at 80 degrees Celsius you'd start getting first drips, and you'd expect to see this sort of stuff by about 82 degrees Celsius, and I'd expect that by the time I was at 93 degrees Celsius, which we've just rolled over to, I'd have about half a jar, 2 litres or so from a 20 litre wash, at maybe 50 or 60%. So a little bit concerned, but let's just go with it and see where it goes. Okay, it's the next morning now. We're on the second run, which is nearly finished. We've got almost 5 litres. I'd say maybe 30% in here of low wines. And I emptied out the still this morning. The molasses was smelling amazing. It was smelling so good. So I'm not going to use it for making a molasses extract because it's not food safe. So even though it's gone through a boiling process twice, I'm not going to use what's left over for something that's going to be in the end product. That just seems... toilet just flushed. That just seems like a really bad idea. So instead, we're going to use it to make a secondary rum, and we're going to use it as dunder, but that's it. On the day of the spirit run for the animal feed run, why do people always flush the toilet when I'm down here? And just over here we've got the 60 litres of the food grade molasses wash. I don't have a bubbler, so I just have a cup over the top of the bung. But just giving it a smell. Sorry. When you first open a beer. When you first open a beer and you inhale and just have that. It's giving off the smell that the animal feed molasses had when we first started. And this has been down for about 5 or 6 days. So it's sort of like the animal food molasses went up during fermentation. This aroma for this one's come down. Crazy how it's worked out that way, but interesting. And it could be because of all the banana skins in here breaking down and adding sulfur into the wash, which is a factor that I never considered, but it's making for some, with other experiments, it's made for some really yum flavors, so maybe there is something to having sulfur in your molasses.
Now back to the spirit run.
12 litres at 40%.
The idea here is to add up all the low wines from the 3 stripping runs back into my still with about 1/4 of the total volume made up from leftover dunder from the original runs.
Or from one of the runs. It was from the middle run of the 60 litres that we were still. I'm going to do to about there. That's about 5 litres. I'm not being exact with this.
That's to add back flavour when we finally come to do the spirit run. The spirit run will be conducted slower, with only one of the T500 boiler's 1100 watt elements running. If it was possible, I'd run it even slower than this, but these are the tools that I have currently, and that's maybe something to look into in the future. At the slower speed, I can make better cuts from the offtake, separating out heads, hearts, and tails of the spirit, and returning later to blend them together in the final product.
We're getting towards the tail ends of the run now. I'm on to jar number 7. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but jar number 6 was pretty hefty, and that would be the, I'd say, end of hearts, beginning of tails. It's quite tailsy. I also got jar number 3 is about 3, maybe 2.5 litres. So I made sure that I took a really heavy hearts cut, and then I was a little bit more conservative towards the end of hearts, beginning of tails, because I don't know where it's going to come through. But right now, flavors coming off the still have like a coffee, a bitterness, sort of a burnt toffee flavor. Still kind of pleasant, and it'd clean up if it sat on wood for long enough. But yeah, all in all, I'm quite impressed with what we're getting out of this, despite the fact that the low wines that we got weren't as robust as what I wanted. Sorry, there's a little bug trying to get in. He's not going to get in.
Nearly a week later, I've returned to the shed to decide on what cuts I'll keep and which ones I'll discard. I use the term discard lightly. Nothing here gets wasted. The heads and tails, which are too potent or off-flavoured, will go into faints jars, and once I get over 5 litres of discarded rum, I'll run that again together to make a spiced rum base. So everything here will eventually get used. So here is my final spirit from the animal feed molasses run. I want to make sure that when the food grade batch is ready, I'll have a consistent way of measuring them together. So this will go away for now, and we'll return to this later on in the video.
It's come to my attention that I have over 100 litres of rum wash going on.
Now, I'll probably title this something like the Big Rum Experiment, and I can't really justify calling it that if I'm only making 2 washes of rum and comparing them together. So, Remembering what we learned in my last video where I recycled leftover dunder and breathed new life into it by dissolving new sugar into it, well, what do you think I'm going to do with all of this leftover dunder lying around all over the place? So, in an attempt to just get some room going, because this big boy is ready for distillation, but I need somewhere to put all of the leftover dunder so that I can do my secondary wash. So this needs to come out now. It was pretty much done. It's been here for about a week and a half, so I think it was cooked. You know, it's been sitting on the heat pad for pretty much that whole time. The fermenter I'm currently emptying is a secondary rum, made the same way as the rum I made in my previous video, using the animal feed dunder and raw sugar. The predicament that I'm in here is that I want to do the same thing with the 60 litre food grade wash, so that I have a food grade and animal feed secondary rum to compare each other to, but I don't have anywhere to store the dunder, so I need to distill this secondary rum in this fermenter and make some room. And my other fermenter is currently filled with another secondary rum wash, dunder wash thing. So yes, to qualify calling this video the Big Rum Experiment, we're making 2 60 litre washes, one with animal feed and one with food grade molasses, and from the dunder of both of these batches we're going to make one secondary rum with raw sugar and then another with table sugar, each measuring 25 litres, and all up that's 220 litres of rum wash. And I only have capacity to ferment half of that at a time, so it's one big juggling act. And up next is just a ton of stripping. Stripping like you wouldn't believe. Stripping like that one girl from high school that didn't have any options left when you all graduated. Probably not like that. But here I am, I'm doing in this footage, the secondary animal feed molasses run and stripping that one out. And then once that's all done, here we are again with the 60 litres of food grade molasses, which all has to be stripped over 3 runs. So we're here with the food grade molasses rum, which we had the 60 litres worth of, and we've just distilled that over the course of yesterday down to 15 litres at 30%, which is now in the still, which is very similar to what we had with the animal feed molasses quantities. I was expecting a little bit higher of an ABV on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add back a little bit of the dunder from the wash just to help with the flavour, just to sort of top it up a bit to around 20 litres, and then we're going to run the still again for the spirit run, nice and slow, and see how much we can capture. After taking some nice wide cuts from the food grade molasses run, it is again time to blend and put aside the sample that I'll use to compare with the animal feed molasses. Alright, it's been a little bit of a wild couple of days, especially over the weekend, where we managed to finally distill the last food grade, big tub of food grade rum wash, and we managed to get about, I think in the end it was around 7 litres at 60% of the food grade molasses wash, which isn't too bad. It's about 2 extra litres than what I got out of the animal feed molasses, so I think my hypothesis around there being more sugar in the food grade stuff is correct, or there was something in the animal feed molasses that just wasn't allowing fermentation to happen properly. And that's on me. I should have taken a reading to figure it out. The whole thing that this whole experiment really hinges on are these 2 jars here. I'm only taking 1.5 litres of each batch to measure it the same way and compare, so from this batch I have a large amount of standard rum to play with. And I just so happen to have a bad motivator barrel that I filled with mead several months ago, and it's ready to be emptied out, so I purged the barrel and I let it air out for a couple of hours before filling it with its new tenant, this standard molasses rum. It'll be interesting to see over time how the flavours of this rum marry with the already honey-soaked oak in this barrel. Alright, we still have a food grade secondary rum to make, as well as doing the spirit run and distillation on the secondary animal feed wash that you saw earlier, but let's be honest, by now, seeing a rum wash being made or another stripping run, it'll all start looking the same. This here is the animal feed second use wash. And even me editing and narrating this video from this side of the computer, it's all starting to meld together and look the same. So let's just talk maturation. What I planned to do for my 2 samples was subject them to the same type of wood at the same time for the same period of time, I also plan to add an extract of dunder, so for this I would have to use the dunder from the food grade molasses wash. I just wasn't comfortable using animal feed molasses wash, even though the extract is made using very high ABV ethanol from the heads of each run, and the sediment is racked off, and it's all been boiled to hell twice now. I didn't feel comfortable, so the only thing that's going to be slightly different for the animal feed molasses is that the extract that we add into it will have food grade molasses in it, but it's still the heads from that run to make them distinct from each other. For each sample I made an extract with the heads of the individual runs, and it was added to the end product, and then each sample was diluted to be the same ABV, which was around 55%, and then each sample had an oak stave from an ex-wine barrel, charred and toasted before adding it to it, and points here if you can spot the mistake. We're at the end of the video. I'm really annoyed, guys. I'm really annoyed at myself and some consequences that have led us here, okay? Let me be very frank with you. Around February, March of this year, I've already tasted all of these, okay? This is meant to be the big taste test where I go, oh, this tastes nice, oh, that tastes good, and then you guys take away a lesson, and you see all that, and it's on video, and it looks great, and you go, that was a satisfying conclusion to the video. I like being genuine with you guys. I've already filmed that, okay? I already filmed that video 4 months ago, maybe. It's June, okay? It's way overdue. The reason why this video hasn't come out is because this camera here, the SD card inside got corrupted because I filmed it all and I left it down here in this garage for maybe 2 or 3 months, and when I went to try and take it off, it was saying every single thing on here, not only the videos but all the photos that you took of your family, every Christmas, every birthday, that's all gone. That's fine, I've got this camera, right? I've got this camera over here. That's not the camera that I filmed this on originally. That's a new phone. That camera fell in some water, put it in rice, it seemed fine, it was on rice support for maybe a night, and then 2 days later it fell out of my pocket again, must have knocked some moisture around in the circuitry. It was dead. Okay, so I'm sorry, my genuine reactions to all of this, gone. The worst part is those 2 sample bottles, those 2 sample jars you saw me put away in the B-roll footage. I'll roll it here. The whole thing that this whole experiment really hinges on are these 2 jars here. They're gone. Here's the spoiler. I couldn't really detect a difference between the 2. Okay, so one was an animal feed, one was a food grade molasses base. They both had the dunder of the food grade stuff. I'm doing Donald Trump. That's how pissed off I am. That went into the heads of either or, went into there, and then I put in too much oak. It was over tannинized. It was too oaky, it was too much flavor in that point, and it was too punchy in the mouth. So I chucked all of that into my still, I redistilled it, and I made a spiced rum, okay? Made a spiced rum out of it. I'm not ashamed, it tastes pretty good. A lot of sugar to off-balance any tannins that carried over during distillation. I could be okay with you guys with doing a taste test now and just tasting each one now and giving you my thoughts, because that was like 3 or 4 months ago. These have changed. My opinion of them might have changed. My palate might have changed, and I don't remember what the flavors are like. That was me half an hour ago when I started this video, and I recorded it all on this camera, but I didn't push record on that one properly. So I've already tasted all of these samples, plus the spice rum. It's very nice. And I'm really annoyed, guys, because I'm already feeling a little bit tipsy. I'm on antibiotics at the moment, so I probably shouldn't even be drinking. But I'm going to do this for you, okay? I'm going to do one more quick taste. This is going to be a lightning round, okay? But I've already memorized what everything is now because I've already tasted it. It was blind before, and this time around, it's not. And that's too big of a sample. So let's talk about, try and wrap everything up so we can have a conclusion to this video while we taste these rums. I'm going to swap these 2 around this time, though, because these 2 are related. Alright, so, the end of the experiment, we've got, what, 25, maybe 26 litres of rum, all up. plus the stuff I've already used and discarded and given away. So the main part of this experiment was to figure out, can you make a rum from a cheaper byproduct, this is molasses, rather than buying the expensive one, which we all know is just inflating in price, and once it goes up in price, it's never coming back down again. So food grade molasses, it's up at $80, $90 for 14 kgs. I can buy 25 kgs of animal feed molasses for $65. It just seems like a no-brainer that animal feed molasses is more viable economically, it's more easily accessible. I can get it from just down the road, I don't have to ship it to me, so there's an extra cost there that I can completely avoid. At the end of the day, do these stack up? Do they taste the same? Do you get the same yield? Let's start with, this is our animal feed rum. We made this one first. We're going to taste it first. It's very caramel forward, very chocolate forward. It's sitting on some oak and some maple wood. So I don't know about the maple, I can't really detect that, but oak wise, yep, we're getting the tannins, we're getting the vanillites. It's also got about half a cup of cacao nibs in there. So there's a bitterness coming through, some coffee flavors. It actually tastes really good, and it would do really well with some, as I said last time I recorded this, some demerara sugar in here would really kick this off and make it a really good, well-rounded rum. And it's been sitting here since the 15th of November, so this is going on nearly 7 months. It's great, it's ready. As a rum, if you're just making this, I think it'd turn out fine. I think you'd be okay to do that. Like I said earlier in the video, having sulfur in the distillation process seems to throw out some flavors that are just wild, and can end up being really nice if you make those cuts really well while you're doing the distillation part. If it's not clear, I'm already a little bit tipsy, okay? So just go easy on me. This is from our barrel, so I keep standing, I've got a mirror behind me, I keep putting my foot on it, that's not good. Yeah, now I can lean against the wall like a cool English teacher that probably had a relationship with one of the girls in your year. This is really, I'm really impressed with this, okay? Nothing on that, because they're two different things, they've been stored in separate things. This barrel had mead in it for about 3 or 4 months. That mead has turned out really, really nice, and the rum that's gone in there, it's picked up all these honey notes, and there was orange in there as well, so it's picked up some orange oil, it's pulled it out and it's infused it as part of the flavor. It's been sitting in here for about 6 months already. Again, we're at that precious time, and it's just turned out really smooth. ABV wise, it is at 60%, so it's at cask strength, and it's just fantastic. Like, that's going to be a great rum that maybe I pull out on my 40th birthday in 4 years time. Jeez. And it just goes down a treat, so keep an eye on that one. Next up we have our animal feed secondary, and this guy is actually probably one of my most impressive ones, because there's all these crazy esters that have come out, there's all these crazy flavors. It's been sitting on applewood, and so when you smell it, it's like breathing in a bustle of green apples, like Granny Smith apples, nice and crisp. And then on the palate, you've got just a heavy molasses, caramel notes, very grassy, very fresh. This is sitting at 50%, so it's not quite cask strength. It is quite high, and the colour, it's a nice golden rum, and I'm happy to let that sit there for another 6 months for all I care. So again, if you haven't seen the video, I'll put a link here. Making a secondary rum out of your leftover dunder is a cheap way to push it further, get more product. Anyway, this is our food grade molasses equivalent of this guy. It's the same thing. We took the leftover dunder from our food grade rum. We made a secondary wash with raw sugar. We didn't get as much out of it, so I think I pulled the trigger a bit earlier on this one. This is only 45%. It's obviously less volume. There was a lot of unfermented sugar left over in that rum, and I'll tell you what I did with that later. Green apple on the nose, same flavors. It's almost the same at this point. At this point, when you're 8 drinks in, it all starts tasting the same. No, but it's just, because it's a lot of ABV, it just tastes like, and I said this before, it tastes like this guy if he'd been on the rocks for maybe 10-20 minutes on a warm day. Moving over here, let's start with this guy. This is my baking experiment rum. So what I did was I had a whole bunch of white sugar at the time because I was making some gin and I had excess sugar lying around. So I poured a bunch in with some of what came out of the still after making this. Added white sugar, added water. No, that's not what I did. After making this guy, I had 40 odd litres of dunder. So I made that guy and I made this guy. These guys are brothers. Oh, this is a mess. What I did with this one is I added the white sugar in, probably not as much as the brown sugar, which you can tell because there's not as much here. And then I also popped in some fudge. I'd been making fudge, chocolate fudge, where you melt the sugar down and it's a really tricky process. You have to get it just right, and it burnt. And I was like, I don't want to eat this, but I don't want it to go to waste, so I just scooped it into the fermenter and just let it sit there. So what we've got from this is a rum that's been sitting on pecan wood. That's what I did with the process. That's what it became, and that's what it is now, and now we're going to taste it. This is such a coherent part of the video. Straight away on the nose, it's the pecan wood smell. So I'm not a big pecan nut eater, but I can tell you what the wood smells like because I got a bag of it from the hardware store over there for smoking. That's what I've chucked in here, and it smells one for one. Like, it's that flavour. It's really nice. It's really smooth. It's just good. I don't have any other notes. It's good. It's chocolatey. It's rounded. It's got that molasses forward flavour. So I think I did put some extract in here at some point. I'm really impressed with how it's turned out, and I'm looking forward to maybe bottling it up for the summer and having a few Christmas gifts come out of that. So now we come to our last one, which is a dark rum that I made, and this one stands out a little bit because this is our food grade second run rum, right? And I was talking before about the levels. You can see they're different. I realized that I fermented this one too, I distilled this one too soon. It was still fermenting, there was still sugar in the wash, and I didn't want that to go to waste. So when I had that all available to me, I went and bought more raw sugar. I grabbed that dunder that was left over and I made another wash, but I did maybe 30% less sugar than what was in these ones when I made them. So I think I put 6 kgs of sugar, that's 2.5 bags in each of these. I only put 1 bag in this guy, 4 kgs of sugar plus whatever was available in the dunder that was left over that hadn't been fermented out, because I distilled that guy too quickly. Does that make sense? I tried to rectify my mistake with this abomination. And so what we've got here is, I made a dark rum. When I got the dunder out of that, I used the heads and I made an extract and I made a very dark rum. And I've probably put a little bit too many pieces of oak in here. So after this, I'm going to go get my tongs and I'm going to fish out 2 pieces of oak, because I've realized since that experimental piece that I'm over oaking some of these things. That's the history story done. Let's try the sample. And this one turned out really nice. I'm going to spoil that already. It's got some really nice chocolatey burnt notes. There's some really nice charred pieces of oak in there, so there's a smokiness coming through. That is great. That is the end of a Mai Tai. And you sipped it down with the straw and you got to the dark part on the top and it's all coming through. That's going to be fantastic. That's great. All right. I'm so done with this video, guys. I can't lie. That was a bit grueling. So, thank you for sticking with me. The moral of the story, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I don't know if I've said this on camera yet, is that it doesn't matter whether you're going with food grade molasses or animal feed molasses to make a good base for a rum. But if you want to make something dark like that, if you want to be able to use your dunder again and again and use it in the final product, I would 100% recommend using a food grade molasses. You could make this. You could make an animal feed molasses base rum, make a golden rum, and then just chuck new raw food grade molasses in it and make it blackstrap, and it will taste great. And I want to try that. Like, It's on my agenda to try in the future. But yeah, I think it just depends on what you want to make. Plan it out that way. If you want to make a dark rum, a really like authentic pirate rum or a Jamaican rum where you're going to use the dunder to flavor the final product, go with food grade. 100%. I wouldn't put the animal feed molasses anywhere near the end product unless it's gone through a still first. But I'd be happy to hear from you what your thoughts and takeaways are, whether you're going to try it, whether you did try it, and what you've learned. And yeah, that's all for this video. If you've been watching from this angle over here, and I don't know if it's in frame still because I had to reset that camera again, but you might have noticed, I'm just going to cheekily, you might have noticed this interesting apparatus to my left, and what's going on there, because that's not what I've been running in all of these videos. That's something new, and I want to talk about that in my next video. So I have been playing around with creating something unique for myself, for my distilling purposes, and this is the result. So if you tune in next time, you'll be able to see my journey in modifying my still and where that will eventually lead. So thank you very much for tuning in. I'm gonna go sit down, maybe eat some carbs, and see you guys again soon.
I love everything. Fire spreading all around my room. My world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright.